Okay, cool. Well, welcome guys to our event called Anybody is Listening. Oh, hey guys, so welcome again. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Emily. I'm a third year university student and I'd like to welcome you to our event, Is Anybody Listening? About students and people in education in the current ongoing pandemic. Thank you all so much for coming today. We really appreciate it. And I'll let everyone else on the panel just quickly introduce themselves before just going over some basic housekeeping rules. So if someone wants to take it away.
I'll go first. Hello, everyone. My name is Sophie, and I am a third year film student at Oxford Brookes. I'm very happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Ren. I'm also a third year film student at Oxford Brookes, and I'm also happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Maria, and I am also a third year film student from Brookes, and I am also really excited to be here.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anita Fábos, and I wanted to thank Sophie, Ren, Emily, and Maria for inviting me to join you. I'm a professor of international development, community, and environment at Clark University, and I'm joining you virtually from my home in Massachusetts, US.
Well, so thanks. So now you know everyone who will be talking on the panel today. Just going to go over a quick couple of just basic house rules before we can begin. So just a warning that throughout the talk and discussion today, there may be talks of mental health and suicide. Please use at your own discretion and feel free to leave if it gets a bit much. We, the tech team, will now be posting in the chat box links of where you can go if you have been affected by any of this. Everyone has now been put on mute. If you have a question, which we do encourage to ask when we start talking about the certain topics we're going to talk about, please use it in the chat box and we'll answer all questions at the end. And also we'd love if people could put in the chat box throughout about their own experiences as students in the lockdown, and if we say something that relates to you or you feel similar, we'd love to hear it as well, which we can discuss at the end. And also finally, we don't tolerate any hate speech and disrespect, so keep this in mind when sharing. And we have people monitoring the chat box and you will be removed. And so yeah, so I guess now I'd love to invite Anita to talk. She's going to talk first, which will be incredible. So yeah, Anita, take it away.
Thanks, Emily. So lovely to be here with you today. I'm a researcher and I work with people forced to move or who have been immobilized by conflict. And while displacement and forced migration is not the same thing as the pandemic crisis that we're all living through collectively, I found that some of the lessons from my ongoing research on living with displacement that I conduct with Katrina Brun from CENDEP, Oxford Brookes, have been really helpful for understanding some of the experiences of my students in the United States and some of you in terms of your university experience and some of the decision making that the administrations have been doing on your behalf. Specifically, Katrina and I have been thinking deeply about the idea of home for people who have been displaced. And in our work, we investigate the way that many policymakers share a taken for granted understanding of home when it comes to people living with displacement. And I think that some of our ideas may be useful for thinking about university students and the practices and places that make being a student a really complex experience, as well as some of the disruption and the policymaking around that disruption that you've been facing. I have been trying to understand student experiences with being sent home by their universities in the US, but in conversation with some of you and in doing some exploring of the UK context, I hope to connect some of this thinking with what you've been experiencing in the UK, and I hope we can all discuss it in the chat later. To do this, I will try to unpack the idea of home for university students faced with pandemic-induced mobility, coupled with restrictions on movement. So for example, what happened to students whose idea of home did not easily fit into the either or concept of going away to university and going back home? What can our collective experience teach us about borders and travel restrictions after our universities required us to go home? And what are some of the ways that we can grapple with the bigger question of where is home for university students? I'll share with you today some of the assumptions we may have around the concept of home and connect them to the broader ideas that prompted universities all over the world to displace their students from the places that they were living. What can we learn from looking more closely at our mobile lives before the pandemic? And what does it mean that some of us did not or could not go home when universities closed their campuses? When pandemic responses led to lockdowns, quarantine orders, travel bans, and mass dismissals in university settings, I was really struck by the policy assumptions around student options of where to go and where to stay. In the United States, my own university, Clark University, closed or announced on March 12th that our campus would be shutting down due to the pandemic. All courses would be taught online in distance learning formats, and all students living in residence halls would be required to vacate their rooms. There were measures in place to support and care for international students due to the global travel restrictions, and exceptions to evacuating campus were granted on a case-by-case basis. But students had no more than 10 days to make other living arrangements than the ones that they had in place for the academic year. Like many people in the US and elsewhere, Clark administrators assumed that most students had a permanent home to return to, a place of belonging where they could safely reside until further notice. The university recognized that some students might have had reasons for not being able to go home, and therefore put in place accommodations for these students on a case-by-case basis. The university also acknowledged that the rapid imposition of travel restrictions put in place by some national governments across the world in a fragmented attempt to prevent or slow the spread of COVID-19 was going to be a burden or a restriction on some of our international students. And I'm hearing some of the stories from you. I understand that that was the case for some of the international students at Brookes University as well, Oxford Brookes. So while many international students were able to fly from the US to countries where they hold citizenship before the lockdowns took place, other international students were not allowed to enter their countries due to government decisions that placed public health restrictions on mobility. So these students could not go home and were obliged to figure out ways to cope in their university towns and cities. We quickly learned, in the beginning of this pandemic, that the COVID-19 virus spreads through droplets that infected people emit when they breathe, and that reducing physical contact among people reduces the rate of infection. So very quickly, we found that governments and locales were putting stay-at-home orders and other restrictions to our mobility to prevent the transmission of the virus. And when I think about this in relation to home, it really makes me think that going home and staying home are two sides of the same coin, which encourage us, or even in some place require us, to find a place to weather the storm of COVID-19 until such a time when we will all be vaccinated. But turning back to home as a more complicated notion than it might first appear, who else, in addition to international students, had difficulties going home or staying home? The pandemic rapidly revealed the social and economic issues that shaped people's access, security, and safety at home. So for example, we quickly realized that it was impossible for essential workers to stay home. We learned how even with eviction moratoriums, some landlords were evicting tenants from their homes as the pandemic-induced economic crisis began to bite. We heard about the risks borne by people staying home with abusive partners or family members. And we came across countless stories of migrants and refugees stranded at borders around the world. And for those of us who did have access to a stable place to live and were coping with our stay-at-home realities, we also began to recognize just how mobile our everyday lives are. Many of us commute from our residences to our jobs, or we commute to our university from elsewhere. Some of us have family responsibilities that require us to move between our university lives and our other lives. A few of us have children that require us to move around the city, state, or region. to manage their care, and our social lives. We have friends in London, we have friends in New York, we spend our holidays in France, and many of us do go home to stable and loving families in Birmingham, in Singapore, in Budapest. So everyday mobility for those of us stuck in place has become a bit harder to take for granted. And in particular, the university student experience of attending their studies away from home gives us a really useful and important perspective on the way that some of us form meaningful, homely relationships with more than one place. It might also be useful to think about whether there is an obvious answer for mobile university students to the question, where is home? There are cultural, sociological, and demographic nuances to this question that I thought it might be useful or interesting to unpack here. So some people go to university while continuing to live in their family home. This is a typical approach to attending institutions of higher learning in many areas of the world. In the US, however, and for some of us in the UK as well, going to university means moving away from the family home and to a university campus. Going to university is also ritualized. There is meeting your new flatmates, shopping for your new room, moving into the uni residences, saying goodbye to your parents. And it can also signify freedom, adulthood, sort of a real rite of passage. So when asking this question from a demographic perspective, where do you reside if you are a university student? In the US, for example, the instructions for our annual census, we have an American Community Survey yearly census that asks you to say that you reside somewhere if you usually sleep there for at least 2 months. And although I did go to the Office of Statistics in the UK, I didn't find the residence description or definition that's used here. But I think that it still is similar that a lot of universities still regularly sleep at their parents' or relatives' house or receive mail there, post, are registered to vote, and they might be claimed as dependents for household benefits. Other students become more attached to the place of their university experience. Maybe you've become involved in your local advocacy projects with other students and so forth. And holiday and summer plans for university students add an additional layer of mobility. Residence in a place can be fluid depending on getting a summer job or getting a work experience placement or something like that. But even if we could pin down people to specific dwellings during university students themselves are notoriously hard to count. In addition to being attached to multiple places and relatively mobile, students have a shifting relationship to the university as a home place. University residences, for example, in the US are considered non-institutional group quarters, like monasteries, but not like prisons. If you sleep there even one night, you are counted as a resident. And our university residences are homey in specific and unique ways, but not all students live in university residences, but in shared apartments or flats, where the census considers them to belong to the household count of the town or city where the university is placed. So are those students part of the university, or are they residents in the city where they're living, etc.? And what if they still do some sort of householder things like getting their post or voting at their parents' house? For people who dwell in one place and nurture their identities and relationships in that same place, it may seem hard to imagine that the concept of residence or home for university students might be so ambiguous. After all, we're used to statistics that give us either or information about people and places. So, for example, standard immigration counts statistics count numbers of people who move from one place to another between here and there. Our census data counts which people in a household are resident and which people are non-resident. And university students are often both here and there, both moving and settled. And that's why I think the disconnect between universities sending students home and students not having a home to go to has been so profoundly disruptive during this pandemic. From some of you, I learned about the financial stresses that have been facing uni students in the UK, losing jobs and not being eligible for benefits and so forth, or losing sources of income from family members living in other places. In the US, there was a large-scale survey that found that 3 out of 5 students were facing some sort of basic needs insecurity. And in particular, relating to this idea of home, there was a high level of housing insecurity and homelessness for students in the US, with 40% in a very large survey stating some form of housing insecurity and 15% of students experiencing homelessness during the pandemic. Circumstances for international students attending uni in the US facing campus closure has been complicated even more by their legal status. Many international students were unable to return to their home countries for a variety of reasons, including travel restrictions, quarantines, bans on entry for foreign nationals, border lockdowns, and so on. Some students' families suffered pandemic-related economic shocks, unable to buy airplane tickets to bring their children home. But with campuses closed or locked down and families in other countries facing their own economic crises, student sources of income plummeted. So in the rest of this session, you're going to hear from other UK-based students who have experienced similar upheaval and anxiety and stress and disruption. University studies is a really unique time in a person's life, and I've suggested that these experiences help us consider the idea of home in a more nuanced and complex way. I'd love to have everyone join in to continue our discussion, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Anita, for that. That was amazing. That was and very insightful as well. Now we're going to look at 3 individual videos from students that are from all around the world. And we have picked 3 of them out from our exhibition, which you can find on the Oxford Human Rights Festival website, and the link will be in the chat below. This year has been very difficult for everyone. I think everyone can agree to that. But we believe that university students' voices have been pushed aside and kind of muted. And we hope this exhibition will bring students' concerns and their voices to light. When we go through the video, again, as Emily said, you can put your opinions, experiences, questions into the chat box, but we urge you to be respectful as well. And at the end, we'll go through them with the discussion and the Q&A. But now I will introduce to you our first video, which is done by Shona Graham, and she's an international student from Singapore who throughout the pandemic felt stuck and confused. And team, may I have Shona's video, please?
Okay, how are you feeling? Feeling okay. It's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty, especially with third years and how uni's going and trying to complete our degree and our dissertation. So definitely a lot of anxiety at the minute. I'm currently in the UK in Oxford, but I'm not from the UK. I'm from Singapore, or my family lives and works there. I'm currently here, but I am planning on moving back within the next few weeks. And as for the places where I can isolate, I have one family member in the UK, but they are high risk, so I cannot isolate with them. And I have a few friends, university friends, that I could isolate with over the Christmas break, as I was unable to go home because of flights and just general lack of information from government and university. But after a certain point, you can only stay with people for so long without becoming an interference. So as I would say, my university house where I'm currently is the only place where I can isolate at the minute. And I'm currently staying at private university accommodation, so private housing in Oxford. I'm not alone. I have flatmates that have been bouncing in and out of the house. So fortunately enough, I have never had to be alone in the house. However, I know that's definitely not the case for a lot of international students in terms of either living by themselves in halls or living with people they're not familiar with or from a different culture, different language. So it has been really strenuous, particularly on international students. In regards to support from university, I would say there could have been a lot more done to help not just university students, but particularly international students who are not only dealing with this pandemic, but dealing with this pandemic away from their homes and away from their families. I particularly, from my experience as an international student, I've never been reached out to personally to check on me, to ensure that I was okay, that I was in housing, that I was not by myself, that I had the means in which I had food, I had just basic necessities to mental health awareness, that kind of thing. I was never reached out to personally. And I was lucky because I did have people to go to, but that's just not the case for most people. And in regards to how I feel students have been betrayed in the media, when we are mentioned, it's always in a horribly negative way, in terms of almost a blame game of that we've done something wrong, that we have made this pandemic worse, and then when it comes to guidance and briefings and government guidelines, we're hardly mentioned. So the hypocrisy of it is that we get a lot of the blame, but we never get a lot of the guidance. So all in all, I think students have been completely left in the lurch, and especially international students. Speaking from personal experience, having to move home in the middle of a pandemic because I was not given proper guidance last year in regards to if universities would remain open, if face-to-face teaching was going to be mandatory, if it was a requirement. I flew back from Singapore to the UK in June, and I haven't been home since, because there's always a narrative, I suppose, that university will start within the next 2 weeks or face-to-face teaching will continue in the next 2 weeks, when they really don't know. And there hasn't been proper guidance for all university students and international students. So all in all, I think everyone could have done more to support us. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm Maria and I'm an international student myself, so I could really relate to what Shona said in general about international students and the uncertainty of whether and when we will be able to return home. I can especially relate to the lack of proper guidance from university, from the government. So she said that she flew back in June because she was convinced that we will receive face-to-face teaching and will be mandatory. I did the same. I was in Poland over the summer and I was considering whether I should stay home or return to the UK. However, because we were promised and that the part of their course, which would be face-to-face, would still go through, and that was also a very big part of completing my degree, I decided to come back. And currently I have not seen my family since summer. And I think especially the Christmas period, which Sean has also mentioned, was a very difficult time because I was also considering going back, but because of not given proper guidance of what's going to happen after the Christmas, because I was afraid I'm not going to be able to come back because of further restrictions. I decided to stay here, and now because of financial reasons, I am not able to come back. And I definitely would say that international students should be checked up on more. We will have another international student later, Carolina, who is my housemate, and I know her personally because she's my friend. And she will also be talking about just a lack of mental support from the university. No one checks up on us. No one makes sure that we still have money for food and just basics pretty much. But we are obviously still expected to deliver work on the same level as before. So yeah, I would say as international students, we definitely have been overlooked. I probably will talk a little bit more about my experience later, But I think, yeah, Shauna definitely also expressed how much anxiety we've been through, and it's pretty much been because of the lack of guidance of what we can do, whether we can return home or not.
Yeah, I think what the whole theme of anxiety is a big thing here for all students, and Shona touched on it at the start when asked how she was feeling. It's like Shona's actually a really good friend of mine, and she actually ended up flying home to Singapore after almost a year of being away from home because, but even then, as she mentions, the lack of information and uncertainty, she didn't know if she was going to fly all the way back and then they were going to be like, okay, face-to-face teaching is now mandatory. And she was like, well, you didn't say that, and now I'm back home and I can't come back. So I think that whole anxiety of not being able to know, I mean, it's touched on later in the second video that we watched, but I think that's a really key thing, because I think everybody's felt anxiety over the past year, but I think students having to have the anxiety and stress of a degree and the anxiety and stress of people not knowing what's going to happen, if they're going to be able to get their degree, if they're going to be able to afford it, if they're going to have a stable place to go. I think it's just really tough on a lot of people, and especially people who are international and do live far away. Not having a lack of information from universities and government is a real issue that's happened.
Yeah, I think especially when Shona said, people being in houses and halls can get lonely, I resonated a lot with that, because through the first semester of this year, I was in halls. And I think when it's portrayed on media that students are kind of going wild, you have to understand that in a hall, I don't know what it's like in a house, but in a hall, you have 4 walls and 1 window, and that's it. And you have a bed and you have a desk. And this is being maybe too dramatic, but it is literally a little bit like a prison where you have your bed, you have your desk, you have a window, that's it. And I think that's been overlooked as well especially with the Manchester rent, what happened there and all that kind of stuff. I think that's been overlooked completely. Also, I think people tend to forget that when you're a student, your housemates are kind of there for you when you're in trouble, or you can just talk to, or they're just a person there that you can say good morning to, and that's kind of what they are. But during this time, especially what I've noticed, because I went into halls with strangers, my mind was just keep 2 meters apart, don't get too close. And honestly, I didn't know half of my roommates before I left because of that distance, that you constantly thinking, I got to keep 2 distance away. And I think that suffers socially and relationships as well, you can build on. And that goes into anxiety later, which we'll speak about later as well. But that, when she was talking about that did resonate with me a lot.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Sophie, when you mention about halls being like a prison, and think about if you think about back in September when students were like encouraged to go back to university, and thousands and hundreds of thousands of first year students going into halls, not knowing anybody, completely, people moving so far away from home with no experience of living away from home, bear in mind, and going into that situation and then being slated and told on the news, why are you mixing, why are you making friends, why are you doing this? Well, what do you expect people to do? If you send someone back and lock them up, like the case which happened at Manchester Met, if people saw on the news ages ago, they bombarded the university accommodation with they like blocked the students in. And it's like, they're people, they're young adults who are all going through personal things as well, and to do that, you're literally, you're causing a lot of damage in like mental health and stuff, and it's just wrong. And then to slate on the internet, I don't know, it's just not fair. And like, you're literally locking young people away and then blaming them for stress. Well, don't ask people to come back. I think that's a really good point about being locked up by a prison. But that's really interesting video from Shona. Again, we had loads of videos on our exhibition website. There's a long video if people want to check that out, please do. We could only have a certain amount for the talk. But now we are going to move on to our next video. So our next video is from James Harris. James, I know he's a first year student up at Lancaster University. And Tech, if you could play James's video, that'd be amazing.
So I am currently feeling a bit anxious about the future, about what the picture will look like in a couple months' time, when we'll get back to normality, or even will we ever get back to what life was like pre-COVID. And I'm in the UK, that's where I was born as well, and currently at home, which is the only place that I can isolate. I do have accommodation at Lancaster University, but I've been told that I can't return back to that. Originally, I was told that I would be able to until the lockdown, where they then said it would be mid-February. But tonight I've been told that will be pushed back to some date, but no idea as to what date that might be. So I'm currently on my own with my mum and grandma, and I do have a brother and sister, although they're in Manchester. So at the moment I'm feeling quite a bit like an only child, which is a very weird feeling for me, to be honest, because as I say, I've not been away from my brother and sister for this long. And the support from my university has been very shocking, to say the least. Ultimately, when we start back at the start of the university year, our flat had to isolate, and they'd actually sent cleaners into our flat when we were isolating. We had little support from them. They were trying to charge us £18 a day for food boxes. They wouldn't pick up our COVID test kits, and there was just a general sense that they hadn't really thought us through very well, with no kind of procedures on how to do anything really when we were isolating. And as the year has progressed, it's been more of a case that ultimately I'm just a number to them, and I think that there's been many situations where it's been clear to myself that the university don't care about us. Say they offered us a £400 rent rebate for the time that they were asking us to stay away, but this isn't equal to the amount of money that I would lose paying for rent. And ultimately, I just think that their support has been absolutely shocking. And in the media, originally, I think that students were portrayed in quite a negative way. There was a lot of coverage over the strikes in Manchester, and a lot of that brought a lot of people saying that, obviously speaking negatively of students. However, recently, it's been a lot more on the side of students, promoting and supporting what they're doing. I was involved in an interview with the BBC about the rent strike at Lancaster University, and I think we've seen a change in the media's perception about how the universities are actually treating the students.
So actually with James's one, I felt very close to his story, because I also have this new anxiety of, are we going to get back to normal life? What's normal life look like? Because even, the announcement where they were saying on the 21st of June, you can go to a nightclub. In my head, currently, I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that. But because I live as well, to give context, with a vulnerable person, I have to think about not just myself, but two people. And I think even after, when all of this is over, normal life it's going to be hard to get back into that normal life, because I think we're so weirdly used to kind of talking to people 2 meters apart. When we meet strangers, you kind of have to back off a little bit, and kind of that weirdness of, because I'm a young human, when I'm next to someone who is older, I instantly go, okay, I'll move along, because of that kind of media coverage as well with students. You feel a little bit like, oh, okay, I'll move across, because you are so fearful of that. Also with halls, like, we got told, I think early January, just after Christmas, or when he said we were going into lockdown, which funnily he didn't say about uni students, which was quite funny. But yeah, we got told you can't come back. And there was a whole thing of, oh, but are we going to get given money? Are we not going to pay for it? Because technically I'm not living there. And you know, the thing is, with my university accommodation, they gave 50% off our kind of rent thing, but I'm not seeing that 50% till the end of the year. So it's kind of, you're still taking money from me, but I won't see that rebate till the end of the year. And I'm not living there. And I think also what I took away from it was this idea of there was no communication whatsoever, with definitely accommodation, and also obviously self-isolating and the food banks. When I was told to self-isolate, I had already been home for 2 days. So when I got that call, obviously I live with a very vulnerable person. My heart just sank, because in my head, not knowing, I had brought home this virus that could affect them incredibly badly. But thank God I didn't have any symptoms, or I was fine. But throughout those 2 weeks, I had no call from the university. I had no call from my accommodation. And I just had to kind of learn how to be calm in myself, because I would have just gone out of my mind thinking about it all the time. And I think that's what, and then I will add on to that in the next video, about how well-being, which is Oxford Brookes' support system, I think could have been better and could have been more useful as well. But that's what I took from that video.
Yeah, I think that was, Sophie, what you said there was really interesting and correct. You know, it's interesting to hear about how you felt as living in halls, as James lived in halls. Anita, I was wondering if you could give, if you had any opinions on that video and what you took away from that.
Well, I think that the feeling of being out of place in two places, you know, not having James's siblings with him, and that disruption, that you know, knowing that there was an empty place waiting, and you know, that the sort of uncertainty of being expected in two places, that resonated for me. But also his just, you know, levels of anxiety, and how difficult it was to square, you know, these student realities, and what, you know, I think, Sophie, what you were going through as well, with the kind of messaging. I think that definitely occurred to me when I was watching the film.
Yeah, no. Oh, go on. Sorry, Ren.
Sorry. I kind of relate to what you were saying, Anita, about like being expected in two places. So I left Oxford in March, I think on the 18th, to go to a family event, and I was planning to stay for about a week. I think I brought like 3 days worth of clothes. And on the 23rd, obviously, we went into lockdown. And I think I could really relate to James with this kind of like displacement of the family, because obviously my whole family had gathered for this event, like my parents and extended family. But when the lockdown came, I was stuck with my grandma for 3 months. And then it happened again. I went to her house for Christmas, and then we had lockdown and I got stuck there for another 3 months. And it's really like scary to be like so displaced from the rest of your family, especially in my case, because I had spent so much time with them before. And kind of going off what Sophie said, like my grandma is high risk. She's a little bit old. And that was really scary for me. A lot of my family are high risk. Basically everybody in my family is high risk. And I think that what was missing from a lot of the discourse around students is that students can be around people who are high risk, like we can live with people who are high risk, but students themselves can also be high risk. And so I think it's really quite horrible to like insinuate that students are responsible for the pandemic when there are students out there who are self-isolating and shielding and all sorts, because we're all people and we all have different lifestyles, we all have different life circumstances, and we all get painted with the same brush, and it doesn't feel very fair.
Yeah, like from my perspective, I can also really relate to kind of being distanced from your family, but also just people really close to you. All of my friends are either in Poland or went back home. I have only one housemate left now because other two, Carolina decided to stay in Poland. My other housemate became a bubble for his girlfriend because she is vulnerable. And so he just wanted to make sure she will be safe. And I can't imagine how it feels like for people that live by themselves, who just have no social contact. They have to feel extremely lonely. I was lucky enough that my boyfriend became my bubble. So at least I have one person that I have close to me. But still, I think this is really hard when it comes to just the feeling of loneliness, because thank God that we have screens and Zoom and stuff like that. But I definitely think that it never will replace like the actual contact with another human being. But now I would want to show you a video of my friend Carolina, who will be talking a little bit about her perspective when she decided to stay in Poland for the duration of this semester and her financial struggles. So if we could have Carolina's video, please, that would be amazing.
Hello. Which country are you in? Are you from that country? I am in Poland and I am from Poland. Is it the only place available for you to isolate? No, I could also be isolating in Oxford when I'm studying, but I decided to come home for the time being of the pandemics due to personal reasons, mostly financial reasons, of course. Because I was forced to quit my part-time job. That was one of my main incomes when I was at university, and now I'm solely financed by my parents. So it's easier if I'm in the family home. Are you in student hall, student housing, or family home? I am in my family home. I could have stayed in the student house that I am renting. Are you alone with or living with people you don't really know? I am living with my family members. How would you say the support has been from your university? Financially, I received financial support during the first wave of the pandemics. And it was really helpful because I was really struggling with my financial situation. I also recently received a call from someone from university wellbeing team who asked me if I'm okay, if I need any psychological support. So that was really, really nice to see that university is really caring about students. It was a bit difficult to contact university in case of future arrangements. For example, now I'm struggling a bit to find information on how the examination session during this semester will be happening, because I'm sure that I can't come back till March, but I don't know when exactly can I come back. How do you feel about the way that students have been portrayed in the media? I think that students are just manifesting their beliefs about the pandemics that is affecting everyday lives of everyone. And surely the university life that we are leading right now isn't the one we thought we will be having during this time. But all those regulations are implemented to help us stay healthy and help others stay healthy. So I guess both sides should be considerate. Of course, students shouldn't be as aggressive in manifesting their beliefs, but I also understand that they are not content with the current situation. And if any rules were enforced in any way, did someone check on you, an app, etc.? When I came back home, I had to have 2 weeks of quarantine, and every day the police called me or even came to my house to check whether I was in this place that I gave the police when I landed in Poland. But apart from that, no one really contacted me about the place that I am currently in. But during this 2 weeks of my quarantine, I was contacted every day and I was checked on every day.
Yeah, so Carolina talked a little bit about financial struggles. She didn't mention everything in the video, but I know that currently she has been really struggling. She's trying to find another person for her place because her parents are just facing struggles as well, which I can also relate to because both of my parents are struggling to find a job at the moment. So it's really hard to pay for the room that you can't even come back to because of the current restrictions. And that is the exact problem that she's facing right now. We both have been trying to contact our agency from which we are renting the house. However, they said that they cannot offer us any reduction in rent or anything like that, which obviously has been heartbreaking because both of us, we have been struggling. Carolina now, I know that she found a job in Poland, so she is trying to kind of cope with that, but it has been really, really hard. I also have been furloughed during the first lockdown. Currently, I'm back at work, but I cannot receive any more financial support from my parents. So I would say the financial situation is a huge thing that when it comes to anxiety. I know my another friend who finished her university last year, but she still had to be there during the first lockdown. She was also really, really anxious just about financial situation. She was scared if she will be able to pay her rent on time. And I think the lack of support from landlords and often agencies is just really heartbreaking because students are really struggling. And in our situation, there is not a lot we can do. Obviously, we can try to find a job, but it's really hard. So yeah, I would say the financial help that Carolina received from university, I know that also helped a lot with being able to pay the rent. I can relate to that because I applied twice, and I got some financial help, which helped me also a lot. Definitely kind of allowed me to just stay in my house because I am working, but I'm not able to work that much to kind of work for both rent, food, and stuff like that. Especially that our rent went up this year as well, which is interesting. Despite the pandemic and lockdowns, we are paying more than last year. But I would encourage everybody, if you have a financial support at university, is really worth applying for, because I am, as an international student, it definitely is a huge help, especially when it comes to anxiety. It kind of lifted the weight off my shoulders, at least a tiny bit. Trying to think if there's anything else. But yeah, I think from my perspective, the financial struggles are something that I can relate a lot from when it comes to Carolina.
I think as well, kind of, I've said this before when we've done like our meetings for this event, but I feel like, especially when it comes to landlords, I'm obviously in Hull, so I have had the offer of 50% off, whereas I know a hell of a lot of students with landlords haven't had that. And I I say this kind of, but students have been treated a lot like children in the sense that if it was an adult in that situation, or let's say someone who's not a student, there would be repercussions for them not living in that place but still having to pay for it. Whereas I feel like with students, we're in a weird place where in the media we're told you have to be responsible, you have to be an adult, and yet when it comes to rent and that side of things, we're treated as children, where it's like, oh no, but you have to pay. Well, I'm not living there, so why do I have to pay if I'm not living there? And having no response. Like, I know I've talked to Maria a lot about this, when I believe like Maria was in bed sleeping, as you do, and then suddenly what they called people who view houses, and like one of those came in, just
came in
just came in and just popped her head through, and it was during a lockdown. And again, to be in that situation, I don't know how that felt, but I would have felt scared, first of all, that someone's in my house, and secondly, that there's also a pandemic going on. I think a lot of the times in that instance, we're pulled apart in the sense that you want us to be adults, but yet you're not treating us like adults. So again, through talking to everyone who's done renting, I think it's hard financially for people who can't go back to their accommodation but still have to pay for it, and I think that's so bizarre in so many ways. But I will say with Caroline as well, going back to well-being, I do think it has got better. I do think it has got a lot better than what it was in the first semester of this year, but I do believe they should have been ready for the first semester. Like, I remember coming back to university and not having a clue what was going on, or what we could do, what we can't do. And especially for freshers as well. Like, I remember my freshers, and I was terrified through most of it. I remember 3 days I was ringing my mum going, Mum, can I come back home? Because I don't know how to cook and clean and do all this stuff. So to be a fresher, but in the middle of a pandemic, you don't know anyone, I think is really hard. And I don't think people took that into consideration when people came back. So I think my only thing with well-being, which is what Oxford Brookes has, is that I think they should have been more prepared for high anxiety, high mental health, and all that thing. But I'm happy they have got better. But that's what I took from the video.
Yeah, no, Sophie, I think you made a really good point there, actually, with how we're expected to act like adults but being treated like children, and the whole situation with the house and the home. It goes back to what Anita was saying earlier, and what really stuck with me, Anita, from your talk, was that whole fact about how out of that large survey, 3 in 5 people, students, were experiencing basic needs security. And it just made me think, how it's just so unfair. Like, I know, life's unfair and everything, but if you can't access your basic needs, then how are you expected to complete a degree and fund a degree and be a healthy human being? It just sort of blew my mind a little bit. And when I mean, everyone has, you know, student landlords that have a reputation for not being the best, and, you know, for getting a bit, you know, and me and my housemates have experienced this a little bit with our landlord. He when we arrived at the house when we first moved in, and first of all it was a mess, and in Corona times, you know, he clearly hadn't cleaned it, and we didn't have any heating, so kept saying, you know, we've got no heating. He kept coming back, and then it kept breaking. And then when we had to isolate with Corona, because me and my other housemate caught the virus, and obviously, you know, we had to stay inside for 2 weeks and weren't feeling 100%. The heating then broke again, but he couldn't come around, obviously, because we were isolating. And then the ceiling started leaking, and he told us to stop complaining. And we were like, so first of all, we can't go anywhere, and obviously you can't come and fix it. That's not his fault. But to then turn around and say, stop complaining about a situation when we have a leak in our kitchen, which is a safety hazard, it's just a bit of a joke, especially when it's not cheap rent in Oxford, as a lot of people know. It's an expensive place, but yeah, it's just mind-boggling sometimes.
Sophie, I think you really hit the nail on the head with that point. Like, I think it comes back to like a lot of the way that students have been shown in the media, even like before the pandemic. Like, we're seen as like having access to loads of money. That's what like uni landlords think, because we still live off, they assume that we all live off the bank of mum and dad. But we're also shown in the media to be broke. Like, everybody talks about students eating nothing but like ramen noodles and ice, and like not looking after themselves properly because we don't have any money. And so it's like really difficult when like a lot of access to money just disappears. I mean, I think I represent a lot of students. I worked in a nightclub. It was a 0 hours contract, and that's gone. Like, nightclubs, they don't exist anymore. And for the foreseeable, like I can't like go and get another job in that same industry, because the industry is dead right now. And because it was a 0 hours contract, I was lucky to even get furloughed. But the way that my furlough worked out, I was making no money at all. Like, it was almost nothing. I was making like maybe like a shift and a half's worth of money. And I mean, I was lucky enough that my parents could help support me, but a lot of people don't have that. And it's not like we can just go out and get jobs, because people who aren't students are losing their jobs left, right, and center. And so it's so difficult for the uni to kind of just wash their hands of us and be like, oh, well, what do you want us to do about that? And I think that the thing that got me the most and annoyed me the most about this whole situation is like, the uni didn't have to know what they were doing. I think that like lots of unis have done a lot of really questionable things. They've made a lot of mistakes, and I think it's because they felt like they needed to know what they were doing. They were saying, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to flip-flop all the time, instead of maybe just being honest and saying, we don't really know what's going on. None of you know what's going on. We're trying our best, but until we like figure out what the best solution is, we're just like thinking about it. But instead they flip-flopped, and they acted like nothing was wrong in September. So people came back, kind of like Emily, like what you were saying before, like, what did you expect? But also, like, students aren't even the only people who were misbehaving during that period. There were parties and freshers that shouldn't have happened, but there were also like illegal raves and illegal nightclubs and all sorts. But students were the people who really got the brunt of the blame. And I can't imagine how difficult it would be to be stuck in halls and feel so lonely and so isolated, and then basically to be told that you're perpetuating the pandemic single-handedly. You are the cause of it still being here, when, like, I mean, students didn't cause the pandemic. Nobody caused the pandemic. It was just a thing that happened. But it was the institution of the uni that told people to go back in the first place. If they had told everybody to stay at home with their parents, then they couldn't have blamed us for it.
I think that's like a very good point, because I remember, I don't know about you guys, but I remember being told, no, come back, you know, it'll be, you know, a month and we'll be fine, come back. And then suddenly, you know, and again with freshers, this confusion of, oh, okay, we'll come back, and then maybe 2 weeks into it, everyone shut down, like, don't leave your apartments, don't go to anyone, be like super, don't go near anyone, you can't go anywhere, you know. And I think, again, what you said, Ren, honesty, I know this sounds very cringy, but honesty is the best policy kind of thing, where you should have just said, look, we don't know how this is going to pan out, come to university if you want to, but this is what it's going to look like. You're not going to get freshers, you're not going to have a massive party in a nightclub that you usually do at freshers. This is what it's going to look like. And I don't, and you know, and then it makes me laugh, where I was like, you know, we're human. You said come, and I'm not saying that the parties that happened, you know, they shouldn't have happened, end of story. But what do you expect if you turn around to people and gone, yeah, you can come and be normal university, and then 2 weeks later, you know, the media is going, students are causing a pandemic and all this, and it's like, no, you said we could come, and then you said we've done something wrong. So I think if they were just honest and just said, look, this is what it's going to look like, maybe in a couple of months' time we can lift it, I think a lot of people wouldn't have the stress that they have now, or the confusion that they have now. But I don't know what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, I agree. I remember even me and Sophie, we used to talk about that a lot from like the first day when we saw each other in the beginning of the year. We were just expecting someone to email us saying, no, actually, go back home. And it was just always in the back of my head, probably a lot of other students. I was like, I'm doing the work I'm supposed to do, but will it be changed? Will the assessments, will they change? Is it actually, like, am I actually, that doesn't have any sense that I'm here? Yeah, I think it always kind of also goes back to the lack of proper guidance, because in all of the free videos, all free students were saying that kind of they got anxious because they just didn't know what to expect and what to do. And yeah, I think it's just terrifying, especially I think after Christmas, when it was pretty obvious that it's not gonna go well. There's something will have to be done, and they were say like, oh no, we're gonna continue with uni, we're gonna continue with probably face to face, and then in like 2 weeks they change their minds completely. And yeah, I think that is just terrible, because yeah, we are humans. It just, yeah, kind of turns our lives around, and it's just really hard to cope with it, especially if you're on your own, away from your family. Yeah, it's terrible.
I think I've also seen that university campuses are intersections also of national laws and local or university admin policies. And one thing that was absolutely shocking in the United States was international students have visa restrictions. So when the campuses closed down, the only jobs that they were allowed to work were campus jobs. But of course, those campus jobs went away, and they were restricted from working in other jobs. So it's not like they could go and easily find other work, even if they hadn't been international students. And what we found was that our international students were going to food pantries just to get enough to eat. And that is just devastating. The university did have an emergency fund, but for every person who was helped, there were other people who were scrambling to get by and not being able to find any sort of financial resources due to the restrictions, coming from being caught between a rock and a hard place, I guess.
Wow, that's quite shocking actually. And it's sort of just, university and going to higher education, it's something you do to set up your future. It's the next step you do, and like to then start to do that but come out of it potentially homeless and nothing, like it's I don't know, it's just, it's really, it's not okay. and it's happening all over the world and in the UK. But it's really interesting, Anita, and can't thank you enough for coming over and talking about how this is all happening in the USA and bringing that insight from across the pond. Something I wanted to mention as well is how obviously degrees are really expensive, but it's also the funding of, you know, funding your own and paying for other things like laptops and software and everything. And with universities being closed, I know a lot of students rely on going to uni. As for girls here who go to Brookes, we all do film, and we rely heavily on uni's equipment to complete our degree, which has been taken away from us this year. And so it's sort of, to put it into context, we're supposed to make final year projects, and 2 days before the second semester started, they said, no, government says you can't come back, so you have to change all the hard work and everything you've done, and you have to fund it yourself and film it yourself. That's not fair. Someone could have a lot of money and be able to buy a crane or a drone and make a cinematic piece, and someone could just be filming it on like an iPhone or not even an iPhone. And it was really lovely actually, because they did give us software to editing software to edit on our computers. But what if you don't have the capability of computer to edit on? You know, what if your computer breaks and you can't afford to get another one? It's just all these things that, and I know people who do other practical courses, like I know for architecture, they have to pay for a lot of, they have a lot of software for their computers, and if they don't have a computer that's capable with it, how are they expected to complete their degree? It's just that whole situation. And then for government to be like, practical courses can come back on the 8th of March. How, well, we're already halfway through our semester doing our work. You know, now what's the case? Now can we use the equipment? But what if people can't, you know, international students can't come back and use it? It's just, it all goes back to that uncertainty and like lack of information, lack of knowledge. Like it's really stressful, and it's causing like a lot of anxiety in people, because if people just want to have a set plan and be able to work and focus towards their goals, you know, we're all in third year as girls, and you know that's a crucial year of your degree, and this has been going on for a year now. Like it's just a bit of a ridiculous to keep tossing and turning and flipping the coin, and then being like, yeah, but we're gonna not compensate you in any way whatsoever for, you know, you're paying to use all this, but you're not going to get any compensation, and you just have to sit in your full balls and do your degree. Like it just sort of makes it just, yeah, I just don't think it's very fair, and I think it's a very unlevel playing field for a lot of people in the getting their degrees.
I completely agree, Emily. I think it kind of comes down to like what Anita was saying, like it's like the government and also the uni, but I think that it goes down even further to like individual faculties, because I know that there are other practical courses at our uni that are similar to our course, and they're allowed to film. But the government has also said that like film sets, like professional film sets, are allowed to film. Like people have been filming TV shows and feature films, but we weren't allowed to film because the government had put a restriction on us coming back. And it just comes down to like there's no kind of what's the word, like there's no coordination between anybody. Nobody is talking to anybody. I don't think that the government is really in proper talks with universities so that they can really understand that there are courses where people can't sit at home. It's not just art courses, even though it is art courses, it's science courses. If you do like chemistry and you have labs to do, I know people who have labs to do, they have to watch videos of labs being done. That's not the same thing as doing a lab to write a report. Like it's such a I think it's just we've just been scapegoated and completely ignored. It's like what Shona said, like we are dragged through the mud in the newspapers, but when Boris does briefings and he talks about education, we don't exist, even though we pay for our own education. Like they talk about children who are like 4 and 5 as a separate category from children in primary school and children in secondary school, but university students don't get a single mention, even though we're supposedly causing every new wave of the pandemic. It's really crazy, and it doesn't make any sense at all, especially this far in. Like this has been going on far too long for people to still be ignoring us and then blaming us.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I also think on that point to mention as well, like, even though this is a talk focused on mainly university students and students of higher education, it is important to acknowledge the struggles of kids, you know, doing their GCSEs, doing their A-levels. Like, they're still students and they're still in the same boat as we are, essentially, you know, not knowing if exams are going to happen and then having to maybe sit exams last minute, and then having that pressure on families to be supporting them while doing full-time jobs and living at home. So I do think that's really important to acknowledge about how, you know, this is all essentially does apply to all students in the sense of uncertainty and having to, you know, pick what they want to do and what A-levels they want to focus on, what degree they might want to get, whether they want to go to uni or if they want to go do an apprentice. Like, there's major situations in stages of life with teenagers and younger students, which I think, and also, you know, for family situations, having to raise your child, school them, do your full-time job, live in the same household, I think it's very important to acknowledge that that's been really tough on a lot of people and a lot of families, which is just, and yeah, and now anyway, I think we are going to move on to the Q&A and sort of discussion. So see what you guys have been saying in the chat box. Let's have a look there. So the first one, hi there, thank you so much for an insightful event. I'm really enjoying it. The lockdown has been incredibly hard on the sociability of many students having to adapt to lockdown rules. Inevitably, students have had to learn and adapt to these challenging events by being more emotionally resilient and flexible in their approach to leading their student lives. However, do you think that these learned skills could possibly have a positive influence on students facing challenges in the future, having been through so much already? I agree with that, to be fair. I think that it definitely probably has made students more flexible and prepared for knocks and hardship in the future, you know, as everyone moves through different stages of life. Anyone else got anything to say on that?
I would say actually work ethic. I think during this pandemic, again, I don't know about any of you, but it's been hard to just do your work because you're living in the same space that you're doing your work. And I'm currently in my dad's study and my dad works at home. So I have to like dodge in and out to do work and print off stuff. But I think in the future, especially we're in the film industry, so the film industry is very hard to get into. I think us having that work ethic and kind of creating that whilst also having drawbacks of, you know, not leaving the house or challenging with anxiety and stuff, I think in a way has made students stronger in the sense of their work ethic, as they can kind of be anywhere and do their work kind of thing. But I don't know about anybody else.
I think it's difficult to say because I think that there are like positive things that have come out of the pandemic, but I think that they kind of vary on a case-to-case basis. Like, I would say, if you ask me if anything good has happened, I got to spend a lot of time with my grandma, time that I probably never would have got to spend with her otherwise because I had genuinely nowhere else to be. But I think that it's been really traumatic for all of us, but I think it's been especially traumatic for lots of people. And so I don't really know if we can like say like as a blanket statement that there are like positive things that have come from it, because I think everybody's experience has been so different. And I think maybe the positive thing is that we have all learned to appreciate that everybody is very different. Everybody has very different life circumstances, and that we need to try and adapt society to help fit the different challenges that people have. I mean, I hope that this talk has shown everybody that there are so many different experiences of the pandemic, whether that be people who lived in halls, international students, all that kind of thing. I guess I hope that if there can be something positive to come from it, that it does.
Yeah, I think I agree with Ren that I think there are definitely some positive aspects when it comes to like structuring your day and trying to figure out how to actually do some work without having proper deadlines or or a university to go to. But I do have to say that at the same time, I think it has been extremely hard on just mental health in general. So there are positive aspects, but at the same time, they come with a lot of pressure, a lot of with an anxiety, and I still don't think people are prioritizing mental health enough. I think it definitely should. One thing that people should take from this pandemic is to make sure that mental health is being talked about, and people are open to be and not just encouraged that general to talk about their mental health, because I think that is a huge thing in students, but just everybody.
Okay, cool. And the next question is, what is the best way members of the public can help students, both from a mental health perspective and a financial perspective?
I would say not everyone, but if you know someone who's studying, or you know someone who is a student, and especially these few weeks now are usually when you get really anxious because it's final year projects or you're doing exams and stuff. I saw this documentary of Roman Kemp in it, and he said a great thing where you text someone or you talk to someone and you say, "Are you okay?" first. And usually when you say that, people go, yeah, I'm good, and then carry on the conversation. But halfway through the conversation, say it again, because people are very good at hiding stuff, and they're extremely good at just pushing it aside and talking to someone else. So he did this thing where if you're talking to someone, say, "Are you okay?" twice instead of once, because I think the second time their kind of guard is down and they can talk. I think that's a massive thing if you know anyone in uni right now, because these in the next few weeks are probably going to be extremely stressful for them. So just check up, just say hi, how you doing, just kind of do that.
Yeah, that's very true, Sophie. Everyone, and also not just students as well, check up on friends, family, people you haven't spoken to in a while. I think a message can go a long way, which is great. And Anita, as a professor of a university, can you talk about maybe from being from a professor's point of view of how you've maybe helped support students? I know you seem to have quite a close relationship with your students and at Clark University, if they offer wellbeing support about that.
Yeah, I think the administration at Clark University really helped faculty by messaging all the time how we could be flexible and gracious and supportive of the students who are going through hard times. There have been, I think that there's been a tension between some of the faculty who are worried that students aren't completing their work to a suitable level or standard. And, my feeling is life is larger than one university module. And I think we can all be encouraged to give each other a little bit of extra time, a little bit of extra space. I know that for me, being in more regular communication with my students, not in an overwhelming way. I think sometimes we've been warned that too many, like bombarding people with emails is also stressful. So trying to find that balance, to find supportive ways to check in, or I have an open office hour every day. And students know that they can drop in at any time. I'm always at my computer. And for that, I think it's, when I was sitting in my office, I didn't do that. I would hold my office hours at a certain time and then I would leave or do other things. But I think it's been easier to have open policies and, sort of different levels of support. I think that's been one of the benefits or the learnings for me as a faculty member.
Well, thank you for that. Do you think that open drop-in policy will be something that you will continue on doing?
Yes, I do. I found that it's more convenient in a way to have my Zoom on, or a kind of a booking. I have a booking app now, and people can just sign up. Whereas when I was at uni, maybe I had to rush off and pick up my daughter, or I had things that I needed to go off and do. So, but that's a great question. Yes, so that's a learning for me for sure. And I've also learned new ways of wraparound support for students through the online learning platform that we use. And that's been also new for me. So I feel like I can offer support in different ways now, or more, a greater number of ways.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. That's actually a really good thing to do. I think having the, one good thing that's come out of it is the sort of drop-in policy of Zoom and being able to connect with people so easy. The next question is, thank you so much for this event. It really helped me get a better perspective on how tough it's been for students. Thank you. That was the aim of doing the event, so people could see our point of view. So appreciate that. What are your thoughts on students leaving this year and being difficult in the job market? I think that it's going to be tricky. Like, it has been tricky. There's not as much opportunities available. So yeah, I mean, it's also, that's another sort of anxiety thing about leaving university and the pressure of getting a job, and maybe that's not such a possibility at this moment. I think is something that is a major sort of anxiety trigger for a lot of people.
I think if you're at Brookes, I would really highly suggest talking to careers. I found out the other day that careers will offer support up to 3 years after you graduate. So if you're really stressed, they seem to be really helpful. The lady who spoke to me was really nice. I would really highly suggest talking to them, and hopefully knowing that they'll talk to you after you graduate is a relief to you. It made me feel a lot better. I know that if you're not from Brookes, I would say check with your uni. Hopefully they have a similar policy. But I think that being in uni is kind of like the best place to be in this job market, because unis have dedicated teams to help us find jobs, because it makes them look good if we get jobs when we leave. So yeah, that's my advice. That's what I'm going to do. I would think that that's probably the best advice that we can give, because we all know that the job market is not in the best place right now.
And I'm just going to quickly just keep going through the questions. So if you've mentioned an experience, we are reading them, but we are very slowly running out of time. And this one we've got here is, does Brookes have a union housing officer who can help and advise on the legal aspects of the housing challenges you have all mentioned? I think that there is a housing advice that you can give, but I actually am not sure. It's not very well advertised. So I actually can't answer that question. I don't know if there is.
I don't know either, but I also think that like a lot of the problems that we've had, they feel quite hard to deal with, because I don't think that they're like illegal. Like, I think that the landlords that we live with are within their rights to do it. I think it's just a really difficult situation, because we don't necessarily have the money to pay, but the landlord still requires the money for the house. I think if we do have one, we will put it on Facebook or somewhere if we can find out information about that.
Yeah, I think sometimes in situations it's actually just between you and the landlord, and it's how that relationship is, and you can get advice, I'm sure, from Brookes. So there will be advice somewhere, and as Ren said, we'll try and get that link out to people if we can find it. But I don't know how good it can be, because I think in a private housing, if you're off Brookes accommodation, it's not really anything to do with the university, it's to do with you and the landlord who's leasing you the house. the next question is, what do you think we should see as the most important action plans to help each other get through this extraordinarily difficult time? And what do you think has been the positive part of this whole experience, even the smallest thing? We have sort of answered this, I think, with action plans, like Sophie said, reaching out to each other and sending a message. I think, you know, even people if you knew from school or people you haven't spoken to since the whole pandemic started, I think it's really important just to sometimes just send a message to someone, just being like, hey, what are you up to? How are you? What's going on? And it can really help people get through this. This is quite an important question that I just wanted to answer. Do you have any buddy schemes for members of the public to support any students who are feeling isolated or anxious or struggling? No, I don't think there is, but I think this is a really interesting idea as a concept of like a community feeling of people being able to support each other.
No, I definitely, because I think, again, going back to essays and stuff, it's, I think, easy for parents and brothers and sisters to kind of be like, but you're a student, so it's, you know, it's fine, you'll be fine. Whereas I think I like that idea, because then you have someone who is going through the same thing as you and who understands how stressful university can be. And I think that's a really good idea.
Actually, in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is where Clark University is located, it's about a 180,000 person small city, and the residents have created a mutual aid association where people can post what they need and be connected with resources that are collected by a group of volunteers. And I know that Clark students have been very active, both as people helping to provide or connect people with resources, but also as people in need of resources. And I think that's been something that's connected them with members of the community in a different way than maybe some of them had ever been able to do so before.
Wow, I really love that. That's actually a really good idea, you know, for students who may not be able to access or afford basic needs for completing their education. Having someone be like, here, you can borrow this, I'm not using it, is a really good way to help and support each other. That's really interesting. I might have a look and see if anything like that is available at the moment, and if we find, we'll post it somewhere so that people can have access to that, but I'm not sure if we have anything like that over here at the moment. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Thank you to everyone who submitted an experience or a question. Sorry, we couldn't read all of them and get through them all, but we will look at them, and we really appreciate you guys like raising your voices and sharing and being with us while we sort of talk about what we've all been through. And, you know, Anita, thank you so much for joining us from across the pond. Like, we really appreciate it. It's been really insightful and really lovely getting to know you and hearing what it's like being over there. It's been really, really lovely. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
And we remember to check out our online exhibition with the rest of the student videos, and go and check out what the guys and the girls from all over the world had to say. We'll post the link in the chat box now. And also, one final note, we will also be posting those links again to various mental health, student support and charities. So please, if you are struggling with this pandemic or need someone to reach out, please do. It's so important. And get in touch with university welfare. They are there for a reason, even though sometimes it may not seem it. If you reach out, support can be found. You know, we're all in this together. So please don't suffer alone if you are someone who is suffering with mental health. And yeah, thank you guys so much for coming, and we really appreciate it.